let's move now to the one octave arpeggio. The one octave arpeggio need to first context what is what I call the basic three-dimensional form on a pentascale. So a pentascale would be, I'm just playing in the octave above middle C with my right hand. And note that we could play these notes with a very two-dimensional approach, or something that is very limited, such as this with just the fingers. Well, compared to this, for example, even though this, I think most of us, if we said, is that legato or staccato, we would first say, that's legato, right? Because it wasn't separated like this, but neither was it really truly legato, where if we use a three-dimensional form, we're able to match the pitch and transfer weight from one note to the next, as opposed to just with the fingers, where it's actually quite uneven. Right? You hear, I could probably make it a little bit better than that, but I think that was a good representation of what we tend to hear when we have very fingery playing that's divorced from the whole body.
So harmony always begins with cadences. The basic underlying most important thing I would say about harmony is the movement of tension and release. So if we start from a tonic, tension increases as we get towards the subdominant and starts to decrease as we go towards the dominant, and of course resolves upon our return to the tonic. So this curve of tension and release is sort of fundamental to harmony in general, and especially to cadences. Cadences sort of summarize these movements of tension and release. So they're a great thing to practice in terms of harmonic inflection, and also many other reasons, as we'll see.
I could also, of course, start from the same collection with this one. Or its little counterpart, a friend neighboring it, with the number 9, 3, 4. C minor, very famous, and one of my favorite ones.
Talk about the first two steps, right? You prioritize rhythm, keeping going, and you put the snapshot method, those two things together. So this is going to be very simple, and these rhythms are taken from pieces. Not this one, sorry, not this one, but let me just show you. This slide is showing you that reading your rhythm, it means understanding the beat structure of your meter, right? So we learned that 4/4 means 4 beats in every bar. The quarter note or the crotchet gets 1 beat, but actually what it means is you've got 2 halves. You've got a strong downbeat and a strong beat 3, but it's not as strong as the downbeat. And so whenever I'm practicing this, let's say if I'm doing a bit of sight reading, sorry, I'm getting my pen going here. I'm looking, it's almost like I have these boxes as I'm looking at the score, okay? And I'm lumping these things at the very least together. Sorry, why is it being like that? Yeah, good. Okay, and I'm at least looking at them half bar at a time. And what is the rhythm in each half of the bar? Okay, so I'm sort of reading the structure of the meter.
Now, the next instruction we have to follow and question and think about is, in Beethoven's rather tortuous Italian, si deve suonare tutto questo pezzo delicatissimamente. Sounds like delicatessen, doesn't it? E senza sordino. Well, you must play this whole movement very delicately, fair enough, and senza sordino, without the mute. That means the dampers in contemporary parlance. So that means, and that's led to an awful lot of argument, that you pedal throughout. So some people have taken that to mean that you don't change the pedal at all. So you get, you know, then surest way to fail an exam, unless you've got a very sympathetic and knowledgeable examiner. I have heard it played like that. There's an argument that that works well on the forte piano because the sound lasted so much less. I don't really buy that argument. It seems, I've been studying that. By the way, if you ever manage to find this book, The Sonatas of Beethoven, as he played and taught them, by Kenneth Drake, that's got a huge amount of information in it. It's a little bit specialist, but interesting anyway. And according to the chapter on pedaling in this book, Beethoven's pupil and secretary Schindler said that it meant a kind of constant overlapping pedal. So in the end, I think it just meant that we pedal constantly. Also, because as far as I understand, fully legato pedaling wasn't common until the middle of the 19th century, so after Beethoven's death. That means that Beethoven, with his usual clairvoyant genius, already anticipated the constant legato pedaling that is good for later romantic music. So in the end, we're back to the very simple decision that we pedal normally, changing the pedal on every harmony, generally with the left hand bass, or sometimes twice when the harmony changes.
So what are some of the principles of fingering? We want to keep ergonomically sound. In other words, we don't want to use fingering that's going to twist our hand around. We don't want fingering that's going to cause stretches, unnecessary stretches between the fingers. If you look at the way the hand is organized, we've got the possibility of a big stretch between 1 and 2, and but not really very comfortable between the fingers. So, you know, when we think about the way that the hand works, the fingers usually want to work together as a group, as a unit. We don't really want to be isolating fingers. So any stretches that we do have to make, usually what we'll aim to do is to close up the hand rather than to have a stretched position. So long fingers, we've all got long fingers and short fingers, and ideally the long fingers fit nicely on the black keys. So if I'm playing a scale of B major, it's tailor-made for my hand, D flat major. Long fingers on black keys, short fingers on white keys. And finally, the subject I'd like to broach in this introduction is ownership of the music, taking ownership of the music, because we often hear performances where it's a little bit like being in a museum, and the curator of the museum has opened up the glass cabinet and said, here's a Haydn sonata in the way that it would have been played in the 18th century. You're not allowed to really touch it. You're not allowed to feel it. You have to just do what it says on the page, and this is what we have to do to make this music speak. And I've heard plenty of performances like that where the performer seems to be a curator of manners, musical manners. This is what they did back then. And in the end, what you get is an experience that has nothing to do with the meaning of the music, what the music means emotionally. And all this music is, it has to touch the emotions. It can't just be behind a glass case. I've sometimes listened to performances of classical period music on the modern piano where I've noticed the performer just wants to get brownie points for doing something correctly. And I feel like saying, yes, very good, dear, you know exactly how to do that slow, very good. It hasn't moved me at all, doesn't mean anything. So we're going to get away from that. We're going to try and find what the music means. That's the number one thing. But I think a lack of confidence gets in the way because we think, am I really allowed to play forte with Mozart? Am I allowed to, express anguish with that sonata? Yes, you absolutely are. Am I allowed to use the pedal in that opening? Yes, you absolutely are. Because if you don't, it's going to sound boring and it won't communicate. The Opus 11 Sonata. Now, this was written at a most interesting time in Schumann's life. We all know the story of Robert and Clara. Robert was a piano student of Friedrich Wieck, who was Clara Wieck's dad. Friedrich Wieck was a very famous piano teacher at the time, who ruled with an iron fist. So he wouldn't, after a while, he wouldn't let his daughter hang around with this impecunious composer, who didn't have much of a future. So he stopped them from seeing each other. And in those days, that was a possibility. The father could actually say to the daughter, no, you're not seeing him, and have that stick. Can you imagine that happening now? There would be an elopement, I'm sure. But what happened was that Robert was allowed to send her music. He wasn't allowed to send her letters or anything, but he was allowed to send her music. And so he writes this magnificent sonata, which I've played many times through my life. And I'm going to look at the second movement now. So it's the first sonata, Opus 11. See, at the very beginning of the sonata, we get this quotation from one of Clara's pieces. It's called The Witch's Dance. It forms the main theme of the first movement. So she would have got this score, presumably through the post, what they did in those days. And there wouldn't have been any letter with it, but there would have been ciphers, quotations within. So in the second movement, Robert is quoting Clara's own song to Anna, and Anna. Here, I'll play a little bit of it. So she would have immediately seen this and thought, my song. He's quoting my song. So that would have been communication that Friedrich wouldn't have noticed. I wouldn't have known about, but private between the two. It's lovely, isn't it? Just the idea that he's writing music that would speak on levels other than just the music itself. So we've got this song on the top of the right hand. Fifths, the Witch's Dance. Diminished fifths. I mean, how beautiful